The real problem is with the human mind, okay? So let's go over some of the problems. All right, so with neuroscience, what they teach you is that what the worldview does, that's very important, is that it filters memories. Okay, the reason why is every day you're absorbing a lot of experiences. If your brain were to absorb all the experiences, your brain will explode because there's too much information to process. Therefore, your worldview processes different experiences. It differentiates between experiences that are important and experiences that are not important. And experiences that are important, of course, goes into your long-term memory. The problem with this is, how about babies? In theory, babies should not have a worldview. They should not have a personality. But if that's the case, then how do they process memories? How do they know what memories to store, what memories not to store? Okay? The other thing is that I have 3 kids, and I can tell you that they're all distinct personalities. It seems as though they were born with a worldview. And then the question then is, where does this come from? Your eye color, your hair, your height comes from your parents' DNA, right? So is your personality from your parents' DNA? Probably not, okay? Just ask yourself, am I a composition of my parents' personalities? You're not. You're a different person than your parents. So this is a huge problem with this model. Where does the personality come from? And why is it embedded in us from the very first day? Okay? What's more problematic is how we think. Consciousness. We do not have currently a model for how we think. In fact, if you study neuroscience, you will find there are a lot of gaping holes in our understanding of the brain. For example, we do not know where the brain stores memory. That's very unusual because a memory is a building block of everything. But we don't know in the brain where it is stored. Yeah?
Isn't that hippocampus?
Excuse me?
Isn't that hippocampus where the memories are stored?
No. The hippocampus?
Yeah.
No, it's not. We don't know where it's stored. There are certain things that we know where it's stored. For example, we know where maybe language is stored. We know where faces are stored, okay? So maybe the faces are stored in the hippocampus. But we don't know where memory is stored, okay? So what we say is the entire brain stores memories. But that's another way of saying we don't know where it's stored, all right? So the other thing is that our current model of the brain, it's like a city, okay? Think of the brain as a city. And what makes the brain work are the roads, or what we call the synapses. When they hit each other, it creates electricity. And that's where we think that how thought is generated. Okay? But this is problematic because we think a lot. Okay? So let me give you an example of this to clarify. Now, in science class, you're taught the scientific method. Okay, what's the scientific method? Well, you do research. You create a hypothesis from the research, and then you create an experiment to test out the hypothesis. And then you have data, and then you make observations, and then you refine the hypothesis, okay? And this is what we believe a way to model the act of thinking. And you're taught this in every class, even in English class, right? You do research, then you create an outline, right? The outline has a thesis with 3 evidence, right? And then you write it out, write a draft, you edit it, and you repeat the process. Okay, this is what you're taught in school. Okay, I'm gonna say something that will shock you, okay? This is what you're taught in school. This is what you believe works. But as someone who is much older than you are, as someone who actually thinks for a living, who teaches for a living, who writes for a living, I'm gonna tell you, how you actually think is the complete opposite. Okay? So what happens is you actually think or imagine the story or the idea to begin with, okay? And then you start working backwards to create the process. You're taught in school, it's a process that creates the idea. What I'm telling you is that in reality, it's the idea that creates the process. Okay? So let me give you an example of this. If you look at every major scientific discovery, it all came to the person in a dream or when or it sort of popped into that person's head. Okay? It's just think of a light bulb popping up, okay? So an example is Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein created his theory of relativity not in a laboratory, not by doing research with other scientists, but simply by sitting in a patent office every day and just daydreaming. And then, boom, the idea came to his head. He's like, okay, now I have this idea. Now what he's going to do is go back and look for the evidence to support his idea. Yes?
Hypothesis is like an idea.
Okay. Is a hypothesis the idea? Okay. No, the hypothesis is the assumption. Okay? What I'm trying to tell you is this. What I'm trying to tell you is the idea or the final product comes first. Then you go backwards. Okay? And you create the draft. Then you create the outline. Then you do the research. Okay? Now, I know this sounds weird, but let me give you more examples. James Watson came up with the double helix model of DNA. How he did this was he spent years and years working to figure out how DNA worked. And then, boom, one day he had a dream of a staircase, a double staircase. And he's like, maybe that's the model I need to use. And then he started to do more research and he discovered, hey, this works. Okay? But the question then is, how did that get into his head? Okay, let me give you another example. I write books, and I've written 3 novels. And you won't believe this, okay? But my wife is here, and like she knows how I work. You would think that when you write a book, you would spend every day at the desk and read books, take notes, and then transform it into a book, right? I don't do that. What I do is I lie in bed and I might play some video games or I might read a book, okay? I get up, I walk to the park, and I come back and I have all these ideas. And I write down all these ideas over 1 hour, 2 hours on the computer, okay? And then I'm exhausted. I've run out of ideas. And I'm like, okay, tomorrow, what am I going to do if I have no ideas? I can't write anymore. But what happens is the next day I get up and I have new ideas. And I write it back and I write it down again, okay? So it's not like I am generating these ideas. It's more like I'm receiving these ideas. If you actually watch me work, it is almost impossible to think that I actually do any work because I'm always like lying around or walking around or daydreaming, okay? My wife tells me that when I write or when I work, it's like I'm possessed. I'm possessed by something, okay? Meaning like I don't see anything and I really don't know what other people are doing because I don't care. I don't care because I'm focused on my work, okay? Also, I'll give you another example, the way I teach. Now, when you see me teach, you think, oh, you must have a script. You must have outlined the class. I don't do that. I have a conception, I have a framework in my head. I come to class and I teach. How do I teach? I watch your observations, I watch your facial expressions, and based on your responses, I then start to flesh out the framework. And how do I do that? Because I'm always accessing a higher force, and I'm receiving this information that I can then articulate to you in class. And that's why if you have been with me for a long, long time, 10 years, you will know I've never taught the same class ever. You can go on YouTube and watch all my videos. I teach this class different each time. Because each time, what I'm doing is I'm channeling a higher force and bringing it to you. But it is a conversation, it's a dialogue. And it's no different from reading a book or seeing a great painting, okay? Each experience is unique because a painting or the book, it's almost like a platform for you to experience the divine or higher power. Okay? When you read a great book, that's literally what you feel. You feel as though you are in conversation with the universe. And this book is really a portal into the universe. Okay? If you read a great book, I'm not sure if you had read a great book, okay? So, if you want to really be creative, you have to trust the universe. If you really want to destroy your creativity, you follow this system, okay? So what I'm telling you, and I know this is going to be weird, but school, it destroys your creativity because it teaches you a process that does not work. No scientist in the history of humanity has ever come up with a great idea using the scientific method. I guarantee you. They've all came up with a great idea through their imagination, through their intuition, by channeling the divine. Okay, that's every single scientist, including Einstein, Newton. Yes?
But
Wait, sorry. Can you speak to the...
Okay, so I agree with what you're saying, but personally, I think scientific method is more like how these inspirational ideas are being presented to others.
Oh, yes. Yeah, good point. Exactly. That's exactly correct, okay? So I use scientific method in order to convince other people that I'm correct. You're absolutely correct. Because if I told people, oh, I had a dream, well, it's not convincing, okay? So the scientific method, it's a way for us to communicate and spread ideas. You're absolutely correct, okay? But as I say, you will never, ever have a great discovery by following the scientific method. You have to have an inspiration. And then use that scientific method to explain your inspiration to other people. Okay? Yeah?
And another thing is that I think how people absorb ideas or like how you wrote a book is based on your, at least some of the points are based on your experience, because let's just say a person has born and he has no knowledge and he has no experiencing on anything, and I don't see the possibility for him to just observe this energy out of nothing.
Okay, you're exactly correct. Yes. And I'll explain this as we move on, okay? All right, but I want to show you there's lots of issues with how the scientific method is taught in school, okay? So, but are you guys clear?